Level 0. The sky turns green, the air goes still. Then you hear it, a low rumble in the distance that doesn't sound quite like thunder. You step outside and see it, a gray finger descending from the clouds, narrow and almost delicate, spinning lazily as it touches down half a mile away. It doesn't look that dangerous. It barely looks real. This is an EF0 tornado, and it's about to teach you that even the weakest tornadoes deserve your respect. Before we go any further, one thing you need to know. The EF scale measures damage, not size. A tornado's width and its wind speed are two completely separate things. Today we're using real tornado examples to compare how large tornadoes can get as intensity increases. These are all historically documented sizes, but the scale itself does not guarantee that a stronger tornado is always a wider one. The examples we chose just happen to go that direction. Keep that in mind. Welcome to the Enhanced Fujita scale, where wind speeds for an EF0 range from 65 to 85 miles per hour. This is the tornado equivalent of a warning shot, nature clearing its throat before it starts screaming. EF0 tornadoes are the most common, accounting for about 60% of all tornadoes in the United States. They're typically narrow, maybe 50 to 100 yards wide, and they don't stay on the ground long, usually a mile or two at most before dissipating. The funnel might not even be visible unless it picks up enough debris to outline its shape against the sky. From above, it barely registers as a scar on the earth. The damage is real but manageable. Shingles ripped from roofs, branches snapped from trees, patio furniture airborne, shallow-rooted trees toppled, road signs bent like cardboard. An EF0 can peel siding off a house or shatter windows, but the structure usually stands. Garage doors buckle inward, fences get knocked over, garden sheds tumble across yards like cardboard boxes, awnings are torn from buildings, street signs twisted into unrecognizable shapes, playground equipment damaged or displaced. Mobile homes take a beating, though, even at this level. The lightweight construction and lack of foundation make them vulnerable even to relatively weak tornadoes. If you're in one when an EF0 hits, you're in serious danger. The entire structure can shift off its blocks, walls can buckle, roofs can peel away. People have died in mobile homes during EF0 tornadoes. The statistics are sobering. Even weak tornadoes can be deadly if you're in the wrong structure. On September 16th, 2010, rush hour in New York City was almost over. At 5:33 p.m., a tornado touched down in Park Slope, Brooklyn, one of the most densely populated neighborhoods in America. The National Weather Service confirmed maximum wind speed 80 miles per hour. Width 75 yards, barely wider than the brownstone blocks it threaded between. Path length 2 miles. It touched down near the Brooklyn Public Library and cut northeast through Prospect Park, twisting treetops off, peeling sides from residential brick buildings, shooting those treetops like projectiles between buildings. People filmed it from their apartments, this gray finger of chaos wandering between brownstones. A steel water tower was blown off a rooftop. Roofs were stripped from row houses. Streets were blocked with fallen trees. Over 25,000 customers lost power. And because it was only 75 yards wide and only 2 miles long, the death toll was 0. Here's the thing about EF0 tornadoes. They're training wheels. They're the universe's way of introducing you to rotational wind dynamics without immediately killing you. They teach you to respect the sky, to understand that when the air starts moving in ways it shouldn't, you need to pay attention. The next example is wider, longer, faster, and it killed 2 people. Level 1, wind speeds, 86 to 110 miles per hour. This is where tornadoes transition from nuisance to genuine threat. EF1 tornadoes still make up a significant chunk of reported tornadoes, around 25% annually, but the damage signature changes dramatically. We're not talking about cosmetic damage anymore. These tornadoes can strip entire roofs off homes, not just shingles, but the whole structure. Cars get pushed off roads, sometimes flipped entirely. Manufactured homes are obliterated, reduced to scattered debris field. Windows don't just break, they explode inward from the pressure. Exterior doors are ripped from their hinges. Chimneys topple. Brick veneer separates from frame walls. 2x4s become airborne projectiles. Metal roofing peels away in sheets, tumbling through the air like deadly ribbons. Aluminum siding is stripped from walls. Gutters are torn loose and thrown hundreds of feet. 20 minutes after that EF0 touched down in Park Slope, something stronger dropped out of the same storm system, this time in Flushing, Queens. Maximum winds, 100 miles per hour. Width, 100 yards. Path length, 4 miles. It was the same storm, but it was not the same tornado. A woman was killed when a tree fell and crushed her vehicle. A man in Flushing died when a tree crashed into his home. 4 buildings suffered partial structural collapse. Over 30,000 trees were downed across the 2 boroughs combined. The entire Long Island Railroad, the nation's largest commuter rail, was shut down. The EF0 and the EF1 spawned from the same supercell on the same afternoon, 20 minutes apart. One didn't kill anyone, the other killed two. That is what 25 additional miles per hour means. That is what an extra 25 yards of width means. More debris field, more contact, more death. The difference between tree falls on your yard and tree falls on your car is a quarter-mile more of tornado touching the ground. EF1 tornadoes can stay on the ground longer than EF0s, sometimes tracking for 5 or 6 miles, widening as they mature, intensifying as they feed on atmospheric instability. If you're caught outside during an EF1, flying debris becomes a lethal threat. A piece of lumber traveling at 90 miles per hour turns into a missile. A stop sign becomes a guillotine blade. The next tornado in this comparison is wider and longer still. It crossed 2 interstate highways, and it kept going. Level 2. We've crossed into significant tornado territory. Wind speeds between 111 and 135 miles per hour. This is where communities get changed forever. EF2 tornadoes represent about 10% of all tornadoes, but they account for a disproportionate amount of damage and fatalities. These tornadoes don't just damage well-built homes, they level them. The HATTIESBURG tornado, in this comparison, stretched to a quarter-mile wide and stayed on the ground for 22 miles. That is not a rule of EF2 tornadoes. That is just what this one did. And compared to the 2-mile Park Slope EF0, it is a completely different category of event. Entire roofs are torn away, exterior walls collapse, interior walls become shrapnel. Cars aren't just flipped, they're thrown, sometimes hundreds of feet, wrapped around trees or embedded in buildings. The destruction becomes systemic. Power lines are snapped, leaving entire communities in darkness. Water mains rupture, gas lines break, creating fire hazards in the aftermath. Trees aren't just knocked over, they're uprooted entirely. Root balls torn from the earth, leaving craters in the ground. The debris field expands exponentially, not just in volume but in the area it covers. On February 10, 2013, the skies over Hattiesburg, Mississippi opened up on a Sunday afternoon. The tornado grew to nearly a quarter-mile wide as it drove through the city and straight across the campus of the University of Southern Mississippi. Peak winds at the USM campus, 130 miles per hour. It traveled 22 miles on the ground without lifting. The Park Slope EF0 lasted 2 miles. This tornado was still going 20 miles later. Oak trees that had weathered 100 storms were snapped like toothpicks. Academic buildings at USM suffered catastrophic damage. Entire walls blown out, roofs collapsed, decades of research destroyed in seconds. Apartment complexes near campus lost entire exterior walls. Residents found themselves looking out at the open sky through what used to be their living room. The tornado crossed 2 interstate highways as if they weren't there. At this level, the visual becomes apocalyptic. The funnel is massive, clearly defined, dark with debris. You can see the rotation, the violent churning motion as the tornado ingests everything in its path. Large debris is visible in the funnel itself. Boards, metal sheets, entire sections of buildings spiraling upward into the storm. Unlike the Park Slope finger, this thing has mass. You can feel it moving before it arrives. And here's the terrifying reality. An EF2 is strong enough to be catastrophic, but it's not even a quarter of the way to what the atmosphere is capable of. Because at EF3, we stop talking about property damage and start tallying body counts. Level 3. Wind speeds between 136 and 165 miles per hour. Violent tornado territory. EF3 and above tornadoes make up only about 5% of all tornadoes, but historically they are responsible for nearly 70% of tornado fatalities. The Naperville tornado in this comparison was 600 yards wide, nearly a third of a mile, and it tracked 15 miles on the ground. Again, this is not what every EF3 looks like. This is what this one looked like. And compared to everything we've shown so far, the scale shift is staggering. An EF3 doesn't just destroy buildings, it erases them. Well-constructed homes are reduced to empty slabs. Walls gone, roof gone, plumbing gone. Cars become missiles thrown half a mile or more. Freight trains are derailed. Trees are completely debarked, stripped naked by the force of wind-driven debris. The violence at this level defies comprehension. Heavy appliances are torn from their foundations and thrown hundreds of yards. Brick and concrete structures that seemed indestructible suffer catastrophic damage. Steel beams bend. Reinforced concrete cracks and crumbles. The tornado can strip the bark from trees so completely that they stand white and naked, looking like pale ghosts in the aftermath. On the night of June 20th, 2021, most of Naperville, Illinois, was asleep. Just after 11 p.m., with almost no warning time, a tornado dropped out of a fast-moving line of storms. Peak winds, 140 miles per hour. Width at peak, 600 yards. Path, 15 miles. It crossed Interstate 355 and Interstate 55 as though the highways were painted lines on a map. It hit at night. That is the most terrifying detail. No warning sirens in time to wake people. No way to see it coming. Doorbell security cameras captured the moment it hit. 1 second calm, the next absolute chaos. Roof sections sailing through the frame. One home on Princeton Circle collapsed entirely. The house next door still standing. The house across the street barely touched. A pregnant woman lost her unborn baby from injuries sustained during the storm. 11 people were hospitalized. Debris was detected on radar at nearly 20,000 feet in the air, nearly 4 miles straight up, as the tornado moved through sleeping neighborhoods. At EF3, debris becomes a horizontal sandblaster. Pieces of straw driven through wooden beams like nails. Small pebbles and sand grains become embedded in surviving structures. Paint is scoured from surfaces. The survival strategy changes at this level. Basements and storm shelters are no longer recommendations. They're requirements. Above-ground structures offer no protection. The next tornado in this comparison traveled 49 miles without lifting. It hit a town in the middle of a school day. Level 4. Wind speeds from 166 to 200 miles per hour. We're in the realm of violent, catastrophic tornadoes now, the kind that get names, the kind that rewrite history books. EF4 tornadoes are mercifully rare, representing less than 1% of all tornadoes. The Henryville tornado in this comparison grew to half a mile wide and traveled 49 miles on the ground. To put that alongside where we started, the Park Slope EF0 was 75 yards wide and 2 miles long. This tornado was nearly 12 times wider and 24 times longer. Well-built homes are swept completely away, leaving only bare foundation. Cars are thrown a quarter mile or more like toys. Entire forests are flattened, every tree snapped or uprooted. The scale of destruction becomes almost incomprehensible. Survivors emerge from shelters to find their entire world erased. Landmarks that helped them navigate their communities for decades are simply gone. The church steeple, the water tower, the old oak tree at the corner, all vanished. The geography itself is altered. Hills flattened by debris, valleys filled with the pulverized remains of civilization. On March 2, 2012, a supercell thunderstorm spawned a tornado just south of Fredericksburg, Indiana at 2:50 p.m. What followed was 49 miles of continuous destruction. The tornado grew to a wedge formation nearly half a mile wide, crossed Interstate 65 during afternoon traffic, and drove directly through the town of Henryville. School buses were ripped from their chassis and thrown into a local restaurant. The gymnasium wall of Henryville's school came down on camera. 5 people were killed in a single mobile home as the tornado reached peak intensity. Peak winds, 175 miles per hour. Stephanie Decker was in her home when the tornado hit. She threw her body over her 2 children to shield them as the house collapsed around them. Both children survived. She lost both of her legs. The tornado killed 11 people across Indiana and Kentucky, injured hundreds more, and caused $58 million in damage. 49 miles. That is not a storm. That is a siege. At this level, the tornado creates its own wind field that extends far beyond the funnel itself. Straight-line winds of 80 to 100 miles per hour exist a mile away from the core circulation. Even structures not directly hit by the funnel suffer catastrophic failures from the pressure differential alone. And yet, impossibly, there's one more level. A place where the tornado reaches the theoretical limit of atmospheric violence, where the destruction corridor is so wide, the winds so fast, the path so long, that even damage surveyors struggle to find reference points, because there's literally nothing left to measure. Level 5. Wind speeds exceeding 200 miles per hour, the most violent classification. The final level. EF5 tornadoes are the rarest of the rare. Since 1950, only 59 tornadoes have been officially rated EF5, or its predecessor F5. That's 59 tornadoes out of over 60,000, less than 0.1%. The Joplin tornado was 3/4 of a mile wide, 1,320 yards. The Park Slope EF0 was 75 yards wide. You could fit 17 Park Slope tornadoes side by side inside the width of this one. An EF5 tornado inflicts damage that seems impossible. Well-built frame homes are swept completely away, foundations scoured clean, sometimes excavated inches deep. Steel-reinforced buildings are twisted and collapsed. The devastation reaches a level where damage assessment becomes nearly impossible. There are no indicators left to measure because everything has been removed. On May 22, 2011, the skies over Joplin, Missouri turned the color of a bruise. The tornado was 3/4 of a mile wide and it tracked for 22 miles without lifting. It was on the ground for 32 minutes. And when it was done, 158 people were dead, the deadliest single tornado since modern record-keeping began. The high school was reduced to rubble. St. John's Regional Medical Center, a modern concrete structure, suffered catastrophic damage with entire sections collapsed. Staff carried patients through hallways as the building disintegrated around them. Over 7,000 homes were destroyed or severely damaged. The tornado generated an estimated 3 million cubic yards of debris, enough to cover a football field 120 stories high. Removal crews ran 410 trucks a day for months. Wind speeds exceeded 200 miles per hour, possibly 250. Trees are scoured from the earth, roots and all. Grass is ripped from lawns. Asphalt is peeled from roads. The ground itself is scarred, trenches carved into the earth by the passage of wind alone. Survivors describe the sound as a roar so loud it transcends sound and becomes a physical sensation. The darkness is total, the funnel so dense with debris that daylight vanishes. The debris cloud reached over 30,000 feet, nearly 6 miles straight up into the atmosphere. And here's what should terrify you. We don't fully understand why some thunderstorms produce EF5S and others don't. But even an EF5 isn't the most dangerous configuration a tornado can take. Because sometimes a single funnel isn't enough. Sometimes the tornado refuses to be one thing. There are many. Level 6. We've reached the enhanced Fujita scales limit, but tornadoes have one more trick: multiple vortices, and the 1999 Bridge Creek Moore tornado used all of them. Here is every tornado in this comparison side by side. EF0, Park Slope, 75 yards wide, 2 miles long. EF1, Flushing, 100 yards wide, 4 miles long. EF2, Hattiesburg, quarter-mile wide, 22 miles long. EF3, Naperville, 600 yards wide, 15 miles long. EF4, Henryville, half-mile wide, 49 miles long. EF5, Joplin, 3/4 of a mile wide, 22 miles long. EF5 multi-vortex, Bridge Creek, Moore, 1 mile wide, 38 miles long, 302 miles per hour. These are the sizes of the specific tornadoes we chose for this video. Not a rule, not a guaranteed progression. Just 7 real events, arranged from smallest to largest, showing you what is physically possible when the atmosphere decides to spin. The Bridge Creek Moore tornado was 1 mile wide at peak. That is 1,760 yards. The damage path covered 38 miles of central Oklahoma without lifting. And this was not just a larger version of the others. This was a different kind of violence entirely. Sometimes a large tornado develops multiple smaller vortices rotating around the main funnel, like moons orbiting a planet. These suction vortices can be 50 to 100 yards wide and rotate faster than the parent tornado itself. They create a lawnmower effect where corridors of extreme violence sweep across an already violent damage path. Storm chasers who've witnessed multi-vortex tornadoes describe them as hypnotic and horrifying, watching multiple funnels dance around each other in a deadly ballet. Mobile Doppler radar tracking the Bridge Creek Moore tornado recorded 302 miles per hour, the highest wind speed ever measured inside a tornado. Researchers documented at least 4 separate suction vortices active simultaneously at peak intensity. Each was independently capable of EF4 or EF5 damage. Together, they created localized corridors where homes weren't just destroyed, they were atomized. The result is damage that varies wildly over short distances. One house is obliterated. The house next door is severely damaged but standing. The house across the street has minimal damage. The randomness of the destruction pattern creates a survivor's lottery that defies logic. Debris was spread over a 100-mile radius. Personal belongings, photographs, toys, bank statements were found in counties they had never been in. So here is where we end. A tornado that began at 75 yards wide in Brooklyn, something a person could outrun in the right direction, compared step by step against a mile-wide, multi-vortex EF5, capable of the highest tornado winds ever put on record. 302 miles per hour, 4 vortices, 38 miles of devastation, 41 dead. But here is the question scientists are now asking, and nobody has a clean answer yet. Tornado Alley, the region that produced every event in this video, is shifting. The traditional corridor through Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas is seeing fewer tornadoes. The new activity is showing up in the Mid-South, the Southeast, the Mid-Atlantic, places with more trees, more hills, more people, and far less warning infrastructure. Places where a mile-wide multi-vortex EF5 has never hit a major metropolitan area. Not yet. The tornadoes are not getting less frequent. They are getting less predictable about where they show up. And the question that keeps atmospheric scientists awake at night is not whether a tornado like Bridge Creek Moore can happen again. It is whether the next one will find a city of 2 million people in its path instead of a field in central Oklahoma. We do not know the answer to that. What we do know is that the atmosphere has already shown us what it is capable of. Everything in this video was just a demonstration.